ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our Saturday morning session. We are in chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita. Today we will start from verse 62 onwards. Now, this chapter, we would recall that it started with a question from Arjun, stating that what is the difference between Tyag and Sannyas. And then Lord Krishna kept explaining to him that Tyag and Sannyas are more or less the same. Different people call them and define them differently. Some call that you should give up all your karma. Some say that you should do doable karma and don't do the rest. Some people believe that you should resign to forest and all that. But finally he said in verse number 9 of this chapter that हे अर्जुन, जो शास्त्र विहित कर्म करना कर्तव्य है, इसी भाव से आसक्ति और फल का त्याग करके किया जाता है, वही वास्तविक त्याग है और वही संन्यास है. मतलब यू हैव टू डू योर कर्म, द कर्म विच इज meant for you to do, that is subsequently defined, which is based on your varna and your qualities. That karma must be performed. So that is an essential condition of Lord Krishna's message in this chapter. But then he goes beyond that and kept defining also jnana and how the jnana can be acquired through performance of your karma in a very simple and sattvic way. And finally, he comes to bhakti. So right now we are in a section which he has called the most secret knowledge, Guhyatam Gyan. Now, Guhyatam Gyan, why he is calling it? The verse number 61, he said that शरीर रूप यंत्र में आरूढ़ हुए संपूर्ण प्राणियों को अंतर्यामी परमेश्वर अपनी माया से उनके कर्मों के अनुसार भ्रमण कराता हुआ सब प्राणियों के हृदय में स्थित है. Now this is something which is the most secret knowledge one can hear, that the God is sitting inside each one of us and we are actually bound to perform in this life according to the software which has been inherited by us based on our karma in the past lives. And that software is guided and controlled by the Supreme. So this is ultimately it comes to the point that everything is based on your karma. This is what he emphasized in verse number 9, that you must perform your karma as per the prescribed norms of the society, prescribed norms of the Shastras, and the specific qualities and qualifications given to you. And once you do that based on your karma, the software will be, given to you at the time of your birth, and you will keep moving according to that software. And then the Supreme will also be in your heart constantly. So this is the Guhyatam knowledge, the knowledge which is the sacred of all sacred knowledge one can imagine. So now let's go to verse number 62. हे भारत, तू सब प्रकार से उस परमेश्वर की ही शरण में जा, उस परमात्मा की कृपा से ही तू परम शांति और सनातन परम ध्यान को प्राप्त होगा. Now he is emphasizing here that go to the shelter or go to surrender yourself completely to the Supreme. Now this is the emphasis which he is giving in these verses. Why he is giving this emphasis? And this emphasis will come further down. So let's take one more verse and then we will explain why he is giving this emphasis. Verse number 63. इस प्रकार ये गोपनीय से भी अधिक गोपनीय ज्ञान मैंने तुमसे कह दिया. अब तू इस रहस्य युक्त ज्ञान को पूर्णतया भली भांति विचार कर जैसे चाहता है वैसे ही कर. Now he has added another thing here, that I have told you everything I needed to tell. The most sacred knowledge I have given you. Now you think about it and do whatever you want to do. Total freedom to him. He is not dictating anything. In most of the other shastras, dictations, there are what we call ordinances, that you must do this. Here Lord Krishna is giving complete freedom, that I have given you the most sacred knowledge, but you do what you want to do. Now why he calls this the most sacred knowledge? This we have to understood. Why the Supreme must be understood by each one of us and why we should surrender to him. Let's take from very simple examples. First example, let's take about this universe. When you go into the space, for example, in an aircraft, where we are only around the earth, people go in the spacecraft, they go into the space. When you look from the aircraft down the earth, you see the houses which look very big here, they look like, matchboxes. The river which looks fantastic looks very, very small. The towns and cities look like a small cluster of houses. So when you look at the things from a different angle, you realize that this city, this earth is very small little thing. This universe is a vast entity, infinite entity. This entity has, even as per the modern science, so many, what we call not only solar systems, but beyond that, there are trillions and trillions of suns in this universe. So this earth is a very small entity. On the earth, we are like a small particle of dust. So our existence is very, very small, very minuscule. And therefore, we should not believe that we are the creator, we are the determining force in the world. That comes out of ego. Firstly, a very physical observation of this universe tells us that we are very, very small little particle of a dust, even smaller than a particle of dust in this universe. So that is our existence. So how we can be the determining force here? That is first thing. Secondly, everything in this universe, what we see and what we can understand with our sense organs, that understanding is limited. Because our sense organs, which are like small little, holes somewhere, these 5 senses of perception allow us to understand this world. Now, look at the sense of hearing. How much can we hear? There are trillions of sounds in this universe, and we don't hear most of them. We hear 1 or 2 sounds. When you use an instrument called transistor, then you are able to hear many more sounds. When you use some other instrument, you can hear maybe multiple sounds. So our ear allows us to understand the sounds in a very limited way. Look at the sense of smell. Now, a dog can smell, I believe, at least few hundred times more than us. He can smell something which is 5 kilometers away from here. We can't even feel that smell within a small, room. Now, that sense organ of the dog is also not complete, but it is far, far more powerful than our sense organs. Look at our eyes. You must be seeing some birds, flying on the ocean, and they are looking at the fish right in the bottom of the ocean. When the fish comes up, they go down and pick it up. Now, look at their eyesight. They can see from such a distance, even while moving so fast, and they can come and pick up the fish and go away with their, you know, food. So, these sense organs with which we understand this world, they give us a very limited knowledge. The knowledge is very small, minuscule of that whole knowledge. Even look at a bird, for example. A bird from Siberia comes to India and goes back. Now you imagine, without any compass, without any direction, without any GPS, these birds fly thousands of kilometers and then they go back. Even in the oceans, there are so many animals. In this vast ocean, they come to the same place to breed, and then they come back and look at their own, progeny at that particular place in this vast ocean. We forget where the direction is. So the fact is that our sense organs, even the best sense organs, if we take that of a dog or that of a, very high quality bird, even those are not good enough to enable us to understand this world. So our understanding of the world is very small, very, very small. So this is the second point. Firstly, in the physical sense, we are very, very small. We are less than a small particle of dust. Secondly, the sense organs through which we understand, they enable us to understand very limited knowledge. That knowledge is enough only to sustain ourselves, to survive. It is not the knowledge which we can gain about the reality of this world. The third point I want to mention here is that if you look at the names and forms which we see in this world is made of names and forms. Now, names and forms are given by us. If, for example, you take some clay, out of the clay you can make a pot, you can make a pratima of somebody, you can make a wall, you can make a brick, you can make, I don't know, thousands of different objects, and you can give them a name. So the names and forms are artificial construct. We give them a form, that form can be destroyed, and again it goes back to clay. We give the name is also destroyed, again it goes back to clay. So the names and forms in this world are basically artificial construct. They do not represent the reality. They are made up for a particular time, then they are destroyed. Even similarly for our own selves, we have been given a form and a name. Now that form and name remains for a limited period of time, and then we go back to the Panch Tattva. We are at the time of death, we are consigned to back to the nature. So the name and forms in this world are serving a limited purpose for a particular period of time, and this is not a reality. This is only uh, what you can call it, the identification for a limited period. Similarly, when we make a house, in this space is vast entity. You can make a house, you can make a toilet, you can make a go down, you can make a theater, you can make a playground, you can make something else in this vast entity. So the names and forms which we give to that space, that becomes toilet or a go down or a theater or something else, that remains not a reality, but it's uh, an identification for a particular object for the time being. So this part, the third part, that the names and forms are which are visible and tangible in this universe, which these are only temporary. They are given for identification purposes. They are given so that we can conveniently talk about certain things. Otherwise, you cannot talk. If I don't have a name, then you will not be able to talk about how will you refer to me or how will I refer to myself. So the names and forms are just temporarily given to certain objects to serve the purpose of this world. But these are not the realities. Now, reality is what? So this is the next part. The, the names and forms arise out of something. In this world, we have identified that there are five great elements from where everything is arising. Those are space, that is Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, and Prithvi. Now, these are the five gross elements from which everything arises and everything dissolves. But where these five elements arise from, that is the another question. These five elements arise from something else. And then finally, you go back to chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, when he talks about that everything arises from avyakt. Avyakt. That avyakt from where everything arises is the supreme, is Paramatma, whatever name we give, doesn't matter. So everything arises from there, everything dissolves back to that entity, and therefore that entity uh, is the most, I would say, powerful or only powerful entity in this world from where everything arises and everything dissolves. जहां से उद्गम होता है and लय होता है. That is the place. So that is why he is giving emphasis here that why we should surrender to the Supreme. Because if we go to a backward journey of our life, we will ultimately find that the first backward journey take us to the five elements. Then if we take the journey of the five elements again back in time, then it will go to Mahat Tattva. Then if we take the journey of Mahat Tattva back in time, then it will take ultimately to Vyakt, that is the Supreme. So that is why Lord Krishna is saying that that knowledge is important. Knowledge of that Supreme Force from where everything arises and where everything gets dissolved, that is important. And that is why he calls it Guhyat Guhyataram. That is the word he has used. Itina Jnana Akshatam Guhyat Guhyataram Maya. That this is the most sacred knowledge he has given to you. That is why he is calling it. That we are going back to the place from where we have our origin, ultimately where we get dissolved, and that force. Now, if you look at chapter 7, he had said there that there are two forces of mind, that is para and apara. The apara forces are eight in number, that is Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, Prithvi, then Buddhi, uh, Ahankar, and Man, Buddhi, Ahankar. So these are the eight apara Shakti, apara forces of the Supreme. And then the force of life, which is the para, from which the whole consciousness arises. So what he's telling here is that we have to go back to that, akyat, to that power, that supreme power from where all this arises and all this gets dissolved. And that is why you should surrender to him. That is why it is the most sacred knowledge that he is defining here. And that is why in verse number 61, he has mentioned that everything is controlled by the Supreme, but based on your action. Karmo ke anusar. Hmm? You get your result based on your karma. But everything is regulated by the Supreme. So this is what we have to understand why he's calling it Guhyatam. Now he is emphasizing the same thing again. संपूर्ण गोपनीयों से, वर्स नंबर 64, संपूर्ण गोपनीयों से अति गोपनीय मेरे परम रहस्य युक्त वचन को तू फिर भी सुन. ही इज री एम्फेसाइजिंग अगेन. तू मेरा अतिशय प्रिय है, इससे यह परम हितकारक वचन मैं तुझसे कहूंगा. नाउ ही सेइंग, व्हाई इज सेइंग इट अगेन? अतिशय प्रिय है. क्यों है अतिशय प्रिय? If we recall the events of Mahabharata, there was a time when the Kauravas and Pandavas were preparing for the battle, and both went to Lord Krishna, the Duryodhan as well as Arjun. And Arjun was given the first option when he was sitting on the feet of Lord Krishna, that what would you like to have? On one side is Narayani Sena, that is all my forces with all the arms. And on the other side, I am alone without any, weapons. So whom would you like to have? So at that time, you remember Arjun said that I want to have you. I don't want Narayani Sena. And of course, Duryodhan was very happy. He said that, he alone without any arms, what can he do? I will have a wonderful, powerful force with all the armament with me. So he took away the Narayani Sena, and Lord Krishna came with Arjun. Now, obviously, when Arjuna showed that kind of affection for the Supreme Force, naturally, Krishna has to treat him Atisha Priya. Because he has already said earlier that तो जो भक्त मेरे को प्यार करता है, जो मेरे को पूजा करता है, मैं भी उसकी उसी श्रद्धा से पूजा करता हूं. So naturally, this is a reciprocal arrangement. That is the reciprocity in the whole universe. That whatever you give to the universe comes back to you ultimately. So this is the reciprocal arrangement. Whether you call it, law of nature or reciprocal arrangement or law of karma, whatever it may be. But basically, whatever you give, it comes back to you. So there, Lord Krishna was given such a great importance by Arjun. So naturally, he is Atisha Priya, and therefore he is telling him again that I'm going to tell you something which is, in fact, he is reiterating, but with greater emphasis. And that is where he comes to verse number 65. हे अर्जुन, तू मुझ में मन वाला हो, मेरा भक्त बन, मेरा पूजन करने वाला हो, तथा मुझको प्रणाम कर. मन मना भव मद भक्तो मद्याजी माम ममस्कुरु. ऐसा करने से तू मुझे ही प्राप्त होगा. मामे वैश्यंसी सत्यम ते, ये मैं तुझसे सत्य प्रतिज्ञा करता हूं. मामे वैश्यस्य सत्यम ते, आई एम गिविंग यू दिस कमिटमेंट, दिस प्रॉमिस. क्योंकि तू मेरा अत्यंत प्रिय है. नाउ इज रिपीटिंग इट अगेन. प्रति जाने प्रियामसी में, क्योंकि यू आर वेरी वेरी डियर टू मी. नाउ ही इज सेइंग अगेन, मेरे मन में मन लगा, मेरे मन वाला हो, मेरा भक्त बन, मेरी पूजन कर, मेरे को प्रणाम कर. नाउ दिस इज द क्रक्स, that ultimately we must surrender to the Supreme. Then only our ego will go away. The ego that I have done this, I have done that in this world, and I have, brought this enterprise to this stage. I have brought my family to that stage. I have given so much donation to that. I have given, so much time and energy for, and this, that becomes irrelevant. That comes out of ego. That comes out of ahankar, where we are not able to give up our, the sense of I and me. The sense of I and me must dissolve into agyat. And that is what he's saying, that once you surrender to the Supreme, all this thing will come to an end. And then you will become the Supreme yourself. Then you don't have to look for the Supreme, because then you are the Supreme. Like the drop of water gets into the ocean, it becomes ocean. Now it is no longer a drop. It's not looking for the ocean anymore. It's not traveling to the ocean, because water tends to travel to the ocean all the time. But now there's no need, because it has become part of the ocean. So this is what he's saying. Why he's emphasizing on this? To surrender. The surrender is the most important element of existence. Surrender to which force? Surrender to the force which I referred, Agyat, from where everything arises and everything dissolves. That is why he is giving emphasis in this last few verses on this particular part of, the reality of the world. So he is coming back to that reality, that surrender to that reality. For that surrender, you have to give up the ego. Ego is not easy to give up. I know it is very, very difficult. We all have this problem, and we all the time try to highlight our own importance, that I have done this, I have done this, I have done this. This is all the time there. It's right from the top leadership right to the most ordinary citizen. This is in existence. And this is the most difficult process. But Arjuna is coming to that stage now. Arjun is coming to that stage. He also had the ego. In the first chapter, started giving sermons to the Krishna. That हम अपने लोगों को कैसे मारेंगे, हम अपने कुल का सर्वनाश कर देंगे, हम वर्ण संकर उत्पन्न करेंगे. He gave all kinds of arguments that time. It was coming from him because he was not fully grasped, he had not grasped the essence of the Supreme. So we have to ultimately grasp the essence of the Supreme, from where, which is the cause of the causes, and we surrender to that cause. So we will take one more verse here now, verse number 60. But here I have to go to verse number 63 once again. Now he says that इस रहस्य युक्त ज्ञान को पूर्णतया भली भांति विचार कर जैसे चाहता है वैसे कर. Now that freedom is given to him. Nowhere in the world you will have that kind of freedom. In fact, I was reading some Western writer. He said that this kind of freedom is nowhere in the world. All the religions dictate terms. There may be 10 commandments, there may be some other commandment, there may be something else. And they say, must do this, must do this, must do this, must. But here, in this, Sanatan context, in the real knowledge, ultimate freedom is with the person, with the human being. You have the freedom. People can tell you, the Supreme can tell you. Now the Supreme, he has shown his, his divine form to Lord, to Arjun. In chapter 11, we saw that. Even after that, when Arjun was not fully convinced, he kept, telling him in 7 more chapters that this is the truth, this is the reality. And now he feels that he has come to accept that reality. And that is why he is telling him that whether you accept or not, its final decision is yours. But I have told you what the truth of this world is, what the reality is. So this is what is very, very significant in Bhagavad Gita. Nobody is forcing him to do anything. Ultimate decision is his own, and because of that ultimate decision, he is responsible for his karma. Whatever he does, he will reap the harvest. So you have been given the freedom, but then you have to take the consequences. That's what it is. So Arjuna has been given the freedom. Each one of us has the freedom. We have to take the consequences, and that consequences, that karma phal, becomes the seed, seed, and also the software at the time of our birth of our new life. So now let's go back to this verse number 66, 65, sorry. Hey Arjun, मैं तुझ में मन वाला हूं. Now the surrender has to be done with the mind. I have been observing my mind once a while, and I find that in 1 minute, hundreds of thoughts come in the mind. Hundreds of thoughts. They keep repeating. And you observe your mind, it is so volatile. It's like the, blowing wind, all the time blowing, blowing, blowing. So that we are able to regulate that mind if we can put that mind to the supreme. If you apply that mind, when you do bhajan, when you sit down in a temple, when you do meditation, you will realize that the mind relaxes, the mind doesn't remain in that volatility. That volatile version of mind, which is there most of the time, comes to a halt when you do dhyan, when you do meditation, when you do bhajan, when you sit down quietly in a energetic place, in a temple or in any sacred place. So that is very important. That is why we do meditation, because the volatility of the mind is regulated and controlled when we do that. So that's first thing. Mera bhakt ka matlab, he has explained that constantly think about him, that there is supreme force which is, running this universe. Like I gave you an example that in villages in Rajasthan, the women carry two, pots of water on the head, and the women walk from the well to their house, and on the way they are talking. They are doing everything, but their attention is all the time with those two pots, that they will not fall, and they don't fall. That is what the bhakti is. Or even a small child in the house, the mother may be doing everything in the kitchen, in drawing room, everything, but her attention is on the child. As soon as the child cries, she immediately goes there. In the night when she sleeps, there may be, a lot of sounds outside. She's not woken up. But when the child cries, immediately she wakes up. So that is bhakti. Bhakti is constantly keeping that in mind. It's not that you sit down and, do puja in a temple. Not that. Your constant attention should be to that power. That power should keep reminding you that yes, because of that, this whole thing is happening. So these are the two very important things. Pujan karne wala, puja bhakti, basically pujan is the same thing that you are, constantly keeping in mind. So this is what he is saying, that keep that force constantly in your mind and apply your mind to that force, so that your mind's volatility will come down, and that force will keep reminding you that yes, whatever is happening because of it. So this is what he says, that if you do this, then I give you a commitment that you will not have any problem and you will continue to succeed in life. This is what he says. Now, verse number 66. This verse is very often quoted. I'll take this verse today and then we will also expand on this later on, next time. संपूर्ण धर्मों को, अर्थात संपूर्ण कर्तव्य कर्मों को मुझ में त्याग कर तू केवल एक मुझ सर्वशक्तिमान सर्वाधार परमेश्वर की ही शरण में आ जा। मैं तुझे संपूर्ण पापों से मुक्त कर दूंगा, तू शोक मत कर। सर्वधर्मान परित्यज्य मामेकम शरणम व्रज। सब धर्मों को छोड़ के मेरे अंदर आ जा। बेसिकली that you leave aside all the arguments. What is this world? What is happening? What is good? What is bad? What should be done? What should not be done? Leave aside all these arguments. And then you surrender to me. Then you will be absolved of all the ill doings you have done so far. So basically, this is the verse which tells us that there's no point in, arguing about things. There's no point about having arguments whether the God exists or doesn't exist, whether the world is real or whether the world is mithya, whether this is I should be doing, this I should not be doing. Uh, these are things which are important. I'm not saying not important, but a point in life will come when you will get fed up with all these arguments. And then at that point, Lord Krishna is saying that you leave aside all those duties, all those arguments, all those lectures, all those shastras, and just surrender to me. Now, this is the crux. This is very often quoted by many people. Sarv dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braj. That leave aside all the argument, just surrender to me, and I'll take care of you. This is very, very important. This is the final lesson of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. So these verses, they look very, you know, egoistic to a new person who will read. He will say, oh, he is telling himself, he's telling that you surrender to me, I am the Supreme. It is not that. He is one with the Supreme and he is speaking as Supreme. He is not the drop, he is the ocean at this moment. He is the Brahman. He is not speaking as Krishna, he is speaking as Brahman. He is speaking as the Supreme Word, Supreme, power of this universe. So he is telling these in that capacity, not in the capacity of Krishna, not as an individual, but as one with the Supreme. Yukt, Yog. That's why it's called Yogeshwar. He has become one with the Supreme. And from the mouth of the Supreme, he is telling all this. So I think there cannot be anything more truthful than these things which he is telling here, that leave aside all the arguments, what you should do, what you should not do, where you should live, in what capacity, what you should perform, whether this world is or it's a mithya, or what are my duties in this universe. You can leave aside all that arguments and just surrender to me. I'll take care of it. I think this is what the ultimate, the advice of the Supreme is to all of us. We are all in the same category. So, of course, we will continue to have those arguments about things here and there, but the ultimate analysis reaches and tends to take us to this point where we surrender to the Supreme, that we are not even a small little particle in this universe, and therefore let me live in the hands of the Supreme. He will guide me and he will take me wherever he wants to take me. That's like a dry leaf is taken by the wind here and there. Similarly, we are like the dry, we become the dry leaf, and the Supreme takes us wherever he wishes to take us. That's what it is. As long as we are wet, it will not go everywhere. Which, as long as we are attached to a tree, it will not fly with the wind everywhere. Then we have that attachment. That attachment will prevent us going with the Supreme. So, like Mira, or like Surdas, if we detach ourselves with all the attachments and we become like a dry leaf, then Supreme will take us wherever he wants to take us. That's what Lord Krishna is saying here. So thank you very much. I think we will finish this great scripture next session, next Saturday. And then we will decide what else to do. But I also want to take one lecture after that on some important points covered in this great scripture. Thank you.